Chapter 28. Luke began screaming and couldn't stop. Suddenly, his brain didn't seem to have any control whatsoever over what his body did. He felt his legs spring up and propel him toward Jen's dad. He saw his own hand grab for the gun and wrestle it away. He heard a voice he barely recognized as his own scream again and again, "No, no, no!" "Stop!" Jen's dad yelled. "Stop, you little fool, before you get us both killed." Somehow, the gun was in Luke's hand. Jen's dad lunged at him, and Luke could picture Jen's dad tackling him just as Jen had tackled him all those months ago. But this time, Luke stepped to the side at the last moment, and Jen's dad crashed uselessly into the far wall. Luke pointed the gun at him and struggled to hold it steady. Jen's dad turned around slowly. "You can shoot me," he said, holding his hands helplessly up in the air. "I might even welcome the chance to stop missing Jen, but it would be a mistake. I swear to you, in the name of everything that's sacred, in Jen's name, I'm on your side." Jen's dad stared into Luke's eyes, waiting. Luke felt a surge of pride that he'd gotten the upper hand, that he had earned the right to decide what happened next. But how could he know what was right? Surely Jen's own father wouldn't lie in her name. Would he? Luke squeezed his eyes shut. Then he lowered the gun to his side. "Good," Jen's dad said, audibly releasing his breath. Luke let Jen's dad walk toward him, gently take the gun, and lay it on the desk. "I was going to explain," Jen's dad said, panting a little. He sat down. "I only work at Population Police Headquarters. I don't agree with what they do. I try to sabotage them as much as I can. Jen never understood either. Sometimes you have to work from inside enemy lines." So the distinction he's making there is he works for the Population Police. He doesn't agree with what they do, though, and he spends his time trying to sabotage them. So, like, secretly, undercover, ruin their plans without anyone noticing. And it's important to notice that he and Jen have the same enemy, but very different tactics. Her tactics were, "I'm going to get angry and get out there and make you notice me and fight for what I want." And that got her killed. And her dad is fighting from the inside secretly to get things done. Jen's dad talked and talked and talked. Luke thought he was repeating everything he said 2 or 3 times, but that was okay because Luke's brain was functioning so slowly he needed the extra help. "Do you know much history?" Jen's dad asked. Luke tried to remember if there were any history books among his family's collection in the attic. Did adventure stories of long ago count? He cleared his throat. "Just from the books Jen loaned me." "Which ones?" Luke pointed to the ones on the shelves above the computer. "And she gave me some articles, printouts from the computer." Jen's dad nodded. "So you got the propaganda from both sides. No truth." "What do you mean?" Luke asked. "The government publications are trying to convince people of one thing, so they stretch the facts. The underground is just as extreme in its own way, making statistics match their cause. So you know nothing." This was never introduced to us by Jen. Like, we never got a hint that we were supposed to not trust any of the information she gave Luke. But her dad says the government books, they say what the government want you to know. But those printouts are just as guilty of leaving out some facts, stretching others, making sure you only hear what they want you to hear to make their side look the way they want it to. So really, both sides have given propaganda. And so you still don't really know what's going on. "Jen said the stuff from the computer was true," Luke said defensively. Just saying her name made him wince. And now she was dead. How could she be dead? Jen's dad waved that away impatiently. "She believed what she wanted to. But I'm afraid..." He stopped, and Luke was afraid Jen's dad might start crying again. Then he swallowed hard and went on. I'm afraid I encouraged her. I passed along some slanted information. I wanted to give her hope that someday the population law would be repealed. I didn't know she'd... Luke knew he wouldn't be able to bear seeing Jen's dad break down again. So what should I know? What is the truth? The truth, Jen's dad muttered, catching on to those two words as though Luke had thrown him a lifeline. He recovered himself quickly. Nobody really knows. There have been too many lies for too long. Our government is totalitarian, and totalitarian governments never like truth. That made no sense to Luke, but he let Jen's dad go on talking. You know about the famines. Luke nodded. Before that, our country believed in freedom and democracy and equality for all. Then the famines came and the government was overthrown. There were riots in every city over food, and many, many people were killed. When General Sherwood came to power, he promised law and order and food for all. By then, that was all the people wanted and all they got. So picture that list on the board we've made of all the things that throughout the book we've discovered the government has control over. The number of family members you get to have, the amount of food your family gets, the land you have, what you grow, what's on the internet, what do you watch on TV. It's everything. It truly is total control, totalitarian. So going back to how that even all started, what did everybody want? They needed food. They wanted food, and they would just do whatever they needed to do to get it. They would trust whoever said they could get them food. If that's what this guy running for power said he could get them, they would do whatever he said. But then Jen's dad said that's all they got. They got food, but now they have nothing else. They lost all their freedoms and rights that the democracy gave them. They don't have freedom of speech. They don't have freedom of press. They don't have freedom to bear arms. So they gave up everything to get that one thing that at the time they needed most. That was kind of the government's way to get this power. Food was their way in. Luke squinted, trying to understand. This was grown-up talk, pure and simple. No, it was worse than the grown-up talk he was used to, because all his parents ever talked about was the corn harvest and bills and the likelihood of frost at the end of May. Those Luke understood. Governments being underthrown, cities rioting, they were beyond his comprehension. Barron's got more, he blurted, then blushed because it sounded so rude. Jen's dad laughed. True, you noticed. I know it's not fair, and I'm not proud of it, but government officials made a conscious decision to allow one class of people to have special privileges. Jen probably introduced you to junk food, didn't she? Luke nodded. That's a good example. Officially, it's illegal, but no one ever got arrested for supplying barons with junk food, which is mighty convenient, considering that all the powerful government officials are barons. The cynicism in his voice sounded so much like Jen that Luke almost gave in to grief again, but he forced himself to focus on what Jen's dad was saying. The government justifies keeping everyone else in poverty because people seem to work the hardest when they're right on the edge of survival. I'm going to read that again. The government justifies keeping everyone else in poverty because people seem to work the hardest when they're right on the edge of survival. So talk about manipulation. Let's think about what does that mean? Think about his parents. Would you work a third job if you didn't need to? No. You work a third job when you're about ready to starve and you need the money. If you had enough money, like you're like, hey, harvest was great this year. We might even be able to take a vacation. Are you going to keep working really hard and get that third job, or are you going to maybe kick back a little bit? If you are this government and you're freaking out about your control, you don't want people getting relaxed. You don't want people kicking back and not working hard. You want people nervous and working hard all the time. Think about what I told you at the beginning of the hour about your grades. If you're at a 59 and you're 1 point away from not failing, or even if you're at a 60 and you're just right there on the edge of failing, You're going to kick yourself in the butt to make sure you get that work in and get your grade above an F. But if you're like at a 65, kind of comfortable right there in the middle, or if you're at like a 22 and you know there's no hope of getting a passing grade, you're probably going to kick back and feel safe and not really work hard. And that freaks the government out, that people might not need them and might not work hard and always be a little bit nervous and always want the government to stay in control and keep them safe and keep them fed. It's total manipulation. The government does try to make sure that most people, the ones who cooperate, do survive. If you've heard your parents talking about other farmers, you'll know nobody loses their farms anymore. But also, nobody ever makes enough to live comfortably. Luke thought about his parents' constant worries about money. Was it all unnecessary? Were they just being manipulated? He felt a spark of anger, but buried that too because he had other questions. But even barons have to follow the population law. Is that because it's necessary? Were there too many people? Are there? Probably not, Jen's dad said. If food had been distributed fairly, if people hadn't panicked, if we'd had good leaders being honest about the need for everyone's cooperation, we could have survived the crisis without curtailing anyone's rights. And now it shouldn't be a problem if some people choose to have 3 or 4 kids, as long as some other people choose to have none. But the population law became General Sherwood's proudest accomplishment. That's why even barons aren't exempt. He points to that and says, "See how much control I have over my people's lives?" So it is wrong, Luke said, trying to grasp the point. I believe so, yes. Luke felt a strange sense of relief that it wasn't truly wrong for him to exist, just illegal. For the first time since he had read the government books, he could see the two things being separate. Maybe that was why he'd been too scared to go to the rally. If he'd truly believed the way Jen had, then he might have gone. And would he have been killed as she was? It was all too confusing and scary to think about. Jen's father looked at his watch. I need to get back to work. I can only hide so much. If you want it, I can have the fake ID for you by tomorrow night. In the meantime, I'd advise you to... He broke off. Luke knew why. A sound from his worst nightmares pounding on the door, and then the command, "Open up, population police."